Hey guys, tonight we begin with something very old, like before history had bookmarks old. So take a second, dim the lights if you can, get comfortable, and maybe pretend tomorrow doesn't exist for a while. We're going to drift through the beginning of everything according to ancient Egyptian mythology. And yes, it involves gods. A lot of them. Most of them related, because of course they are. We start in ancient Egypt, where the people looked at the massive, unpredictable river cutting through the desert, the Nile River, and basically said, yeah, something divine is definitely doing that. And honestly, they weren't wrong in spirit. But before there was land, before there was riverbanks, before there were pharaohs pretending to be politically appointed gods with paperwork, there was only chaos, a vast, endless, sleepy nothing called none. Not a character with a personality, more like cosmic soup that forgot it was soup. And from that, something decided to become self-aware. Enter Adam. Adam is basically the original I guess I'll do it myself energy. According to the myth, Adam emerges from this watery chaos and just exists alone, floating in primordial nothingness, like someone who opened their eyes in an empty room and immediately regretted it. No sky, no land, no Wi-Fi, just eternal silence. So naturally, Adam does what any lonely cosmic being would do. He starts talking to himself, which, honestly, already sets the tone for Egyptian mythology as a whole. Adam eventually creates the first divine pair by, well, self-generating, which is a polite mythological way of saying don't ask questions, it just happened. From him come Shu and Tefnut. Shu is air, Tefnut is moisture, because apparently even the universe needs humidity management. Adam sends them out into the void, and like responsible children of a lonely god, they disappear for a while, which immediately triggers divine anxiety. Adam, now very much alone again, starts panicking, because nothing says Almighty Creator like abandonment issues. Eventually, Shu and Tefnut return, and Adam is so relieved, he basically creates more reality just to celebrate. From Shu and Tefnut come another divine pair, Geb and Nut. Now things start getting spatial. Geb is the earth, Nut is the sky, and they are, inconveniently, in love, which sounds romantic until you realize the structure of existence itself is now a couple problem, because Nut and Geb are constantly trying to cling to each other, and Shu being air, and also apparently the original overbearing middle manager of the cosmos, has to physically separate them, so Shu lifts Nut up, holding the sky above the earth, and Geb lies below forever. That's right. According to myth, the sky is literally being held up by air, like some kind of divine awkward arm workout that never ends. And just like that, we have a world not stable, not peaceful, just emotionally complicated geometry. Now, Nut and Geb don't just sit there looking tragic. They also have children, a lot of them, because mythology does not believe in moderation. Their most famous offspring are the future heavy hitters of Egyptian myth, Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. And yes, this is where things start to feel less like cosmic origin story and more like family therapy session that went very wrong. Osiris is the favorite, the golden child. He might actually fix the kingdom sibling. Isis is intelligent, magical, deeply devoted, and also the kind of person who would absolutely outthink everyone in the room and then quietly clean up the mess afterward. Set, meanwhile, is chaos, not metaphorically, literally chaos. If something is loud, unnecessary, and vaguely stressful, Set is probably nearby. Nephthys is often overlooked in a lot of retelling, which is ironic because she is constantly present in the emotional aftermath of everyone else's decisions. Think of her as the one standing in the background saying, "I knew this was a bad idea," while holding a metaphorical towel. So now we have a divine family living under a sky held up by air, on a ground that occasionally feels emotionally unstable. And of course, it gets worse because Osiris becomes king of the world, and he's actually good at it, which is the first major mistake in mythology. Competence. Osiris brings order, teaches agriculture, civilizes humanity, and generally makes things less chaotic. The Nile floods are understood, society is structured, and people are like, wow, this is nice. But Set is watching this whole situation like someone watching their sibling get praised at dinner. And Set is not a good vibes only kind of deity. So Set decides that Osiris needs to be removed from the narrative. Now, Egyptian mythology doesn't rush these things. There's always ceremony, always symbolism, always just enough drama to make it feel like a royal court with too much free time. Set organizes a banquet, a perfectly normal, friendly gathering. Nothing suspicious. Definitely not the setup of a cosmic crime scene at this banquet. Set presents a beautifully crafted chest, basically a divine coffin prototype, and says it will belong to whoever fits it perfectly. Now, in a group of gods, this is already a weird game. But Osiris, being trusting and arguably a little too relaxed for his own good, tries it. He fits. Of course he does. And immediately, the lid is sealed, locked, and Osiris is removed from the living world, just like that. No dramatic prophecy warning him. No heroic escape. Just a very awkward party trick that escalates into mythology. Set doesn't stop there. The chest is thrown into the Nile River and carried away, drifting into foreign lands like a very cursed piece of lost luggage, and Egypt suddenly feels different. Not because the world changed physically, but because order itself has been disrupted. But here's where things get interesting, because Isis does not accept "that's it" as an answer, and honestly, she never really has. She begins searching for Osiris, not in a frantic, chaotic way, more like a slow, methodical reclaiming of reality itself. She travels, she listens, she asks questions. She follows whispers of the chest that carried her husband away. And while she searches, life in Egypt continues. The river still flows. The sun still rises. The gods still argue in the background, like an ongoing, dysfunctional podcast. But something is missing, and we're going to sit with that for a moment, because Egyptian mythology does something very specific here. It doesn't rush to fix tragedy. It lets it exist. The absence of Osiris becomes part of the world's structure, not a temporary problem, a permanent feature of existence. And that is where the myth starts shifting from creation story into something much stranger, because death is no longer just an ending. It becomes a system, a place, a responsibility, and somewhere in that slow, unfolding silence, Isis finally finds what remains of Osiris. But that is where we pause, because even gods need a moment before everything changes again. And the story is only just beginning to realize what it's about. For now, the sky still hangs above the earth, slightly tired. The river still moves like it remembers something it can't explain. And the gods, well, they are just getting started. So we left off with Osiris being, let's say incorrectly, packaged by Seth and floated down the Nile River like the worst possible kind of royal shipment delay. And now the universe is doing that thing where it pretends everything is normal while absolutely nothing is normal. The sun still rises over Egypt. The sky is still being held up by Shu like he's stuck in a never-ending posture correction workshop. And the gods continue behaving like a dysfunctional family that refuses to acknowledge group therapy. But someone notices. Of course she does. Isis is not the type to accept vague answers like he's gone. That's just how things are now. She hears that and immediately translates it into, that sounds like a solvable problem with emotional consequences for everyone involved. So she starts searching, not dramatically at first. No storm clouds, no divine screaming into the void, just movement. Quiet determination, the kind that makes other gods slightly nervous because it implies paperwork. Isis travels along the riverbanks of the Nile River, asking questions, listening carefully, following fragments of rumor and myth the way normal people follow gossip but with higher stakes. Eventually, the chest containing Osiris drifts far beyond Egypt, carried into foreign lands. It's found lodged in a tree, which is one of those mythological details that feels oddly specific, like the universe is trying to be poetic, but also slightly inconvenient. Inside that tree, Osiris is still there, not exactly alive, not exactly gone, just paused, and Isis finds him. Now, most myths would make this moment loud, dramatic lightning, a big emotional collapse, maybe a speech, but Egyptian mythology, in its usual style, keeps it strangely quiet. Isis retrieves what remains of Osiris and brings him back to Egypt, and this is where things get complicated, because Seth, unsurprisingly, is not done being Seth. He discovers that Osiris has been found, and instead of reflecting on his choices, or maybe picking up a calming hobby like pottery, he decides the solution is further DISASSEMBLY. Again, because mythology really believes in commitment to the bit. Seth takes Osiris and scatters the pieces across Egypt. A symbolic act, yes, but also just incredibly inconvenient from a logistics standpoint. Now, Isis is faced with a problem that can only be described as extreme mythological cleanup. And she does what she always does. She gets to work. Isis travels across the land, gathering the scattered pieces of Osiris. Every fragment she finds is treated with care, reverence, and a kind of quiet refusal to accept permanent loss. She is joined at times by Nephthys, her sister, who is also tied to Osiris in complicated ways that Egyptian mythology never fully explains because it enjoys emotional ambiguity. Nephthys helps where she can, often appearing like the emotional echo of the situation present, necessary, but always slightly in the background of Isis's determination. Together, They reconstruct Osiris, not fully as he was before, but enough for something new. Now, here's where Egyptian mythology does something very specific. Again, it refuses to treat death as a simple endpoint. Isis uses her ancient, structured in ways that are never fully explained, to bring Osiris into a different state of existence. Not living, not gone, something else, a ruler. But not of the world. Above Osiris becomes the king of the dead. Osiris is now associated with the underworld, a realm where souls go after death, where judgment is not random but structured. It's almost bureaucratic in its design. Like someone took mortality and said, we should probably organize this properly. And just like that, death in Egyptian mythology becomes a system of order rather than chaos. Meanwhile, Isis does not become a background character in his new role. She remains central because she is also the mother of something new through magic, memory, and sheer narrative persistence. Isis conceives a child after Osiris's transformation. That child is Horus. Horus is not just a god. He is an answer to Seth, an answer to disorder, an answer to the question of what happens when legitimacy is interrupted, and then tries to rebuild itself. But for now, Horus is just a child being raised in hiding, because Seth is still ruling the world above, and Isis knows better than to rush mythology. She hides Horus in the marshes of the Nile Delta, a quiet, wet, hidden place where gods can pretend to be normal for a while. She raises him carefully, teaching him magic, patience, and probably how to avoid being noticed by chaotic uncles. Seth, meanwhile, continues ruling, and here's the strange part. He's not entirely incompetent. He maintains order. In his own way, a harsher order, a louder one, but still order. Egyptian mythology doesn't simplify him into pure evil. He's more like disruption that accidentally becomes governance. Still, he knows there is a rival claim growing, a child hidden somewhere in the world, who represents everything he is not. And so the tension builds, not in explosions, but in structure, a slow political pressure between two forces, order that remembers harmony, and order that insists on dominance. Isis watches over Horus, quietly preparing him, not with loud declarations, not with prophecy speeches, but with steady instruction and careful protection. And Horus grows not into a reckless hero, but into something more measured, a claimant, a restoration project, and somewhere above them, the sky still hangs in place, and the earth still listens quietly beneath it. The world continues as if nothing is wrong. But in Egyptian mythology, that is always when things are most wrong, and we are only halfway through the family problems, because soon Horus will no longer remain hidden, and Seth will no longer remain unchallenged. But for now, everything stays suspended, like the sky held up by shoe, tired but committed. So now we've got a working system. Life above, judgment below, a structured afterlife that behaves like a very serious administrative department that nobody can fully retire from. And over all of it, the world keeps doing its most reliable trick, continuing. The sun rises over Egypt like it has somewhere to be. The Nile River keeps flooding and receding like it's following a script it never asked to read. And humanity, somewhere in the middle, tries to behave itself just enough to avoid cosmic paperwork. But we haven't talked about the sun properly yet. And in Egyptian mythology, that's kind of a big omission, because the sun is not just light. It is a traveler, a daily protagonist with an extremely exhausting commute. This is where Ra comes in. Ra is the sun god, but not in a sit on a throne and glow dramatically way. More like a very overworked divine employee who has to complete the same shift every single day without meaningful variation. Every morning, Ra rises in the east and begins a journey across the sky in a solar vessel. It looks peaceful from below, predictable, almost comforting. But Egyptian mythology insists what you see is only half the job, because when night falls, Ra doesn't rest. He descends into the dew at the underworld. Now the Duat is not a simple place of the dead. It is more like a layered, symbolic landscape where reality becomes less stable and more interpretive. Think corridors that don't stay still, rivers that reflect thoughts, and geography that feels slightly annoyed to be perceived. And Ra travels through it every night, because, of course, he does. Asterisk on this journey, he is not alone. He is accompanied by various protective forces, including other deities and symbolic helpers who exist primarily to ensure that the sun does not fail its daily return. Because if Ra fails, everything fails. No pressure. And here is the problem. Every night, something tries to stop him. A force of chaos, a serpent of disorder, a very persistent cosmic inconvenience known as Apophis. Apophis is not a villain with dialogue. He is more like a recurring problem, a glitch in the system that appears every night at the same time and must be dealt with before morning can happen. So every night, Ra and his companions face Apophis in the Duat, not as a dramatic final battle, but as a necessary correction, because Egyptian mythology is not interested in ending evil. It is interested in managing it. Chaos does not disappear. It is restrained, handled, reset, and every morning when the sun rises again over Egypt, it is not just sunrise. It is proof that order held. Again, asterisk now, while Ra is doing his very intense night shift, something else is also happening in the background of cosmic structure, the principle that holds everything together. Ma single quotes at Mat is not just a goddess in the simple character sense. She is also an idea, a force, a principle of balance, truth, harmony, and correctness that underlies both the gods and the world itself. Everything in Egyptian mythology is, in some way, trying to stay aligned with Mat. When things go wrong, it is not just bad luck, it is imbalance. And every major Osiris's death sets disruption. Horus's struggle is really about restoring or maintaining Mat in different ways. Asterisk. Even the afterlife judgment under Osiris is not about punishment. In the modern sense, it is about whether a life fits into Mat, whether it harmonized with the structure of reality, and assisting this entire cosmic maintenance system is another incredibly important figure, Thoth. Thoth is the record keeper, the scribe, the one who writes down what actually happened, not what people claim happened, which makes him, arguably, the busiest god in the entire system. Because Egyptian mythology runs on documentation, every judgment, every balance, every divine decision recorded, not forgotten, preserved, thoth doesn't argue. He doesn't fight chaos directly, he just logs it, which, in a way, makes him more powerful than most gods, because nothing escapes the record. Asterisk. So now we have a full system. Ra travels the sky and underworld. Daily Apophis tries to stop him. Every night Ma-at defines what correct existence even means. Thoth records everything, so it cannot be denied. Osiris judges the dead. Horus represents kingship above. Seth represents disruption within order, not outside it. Isis maintains continuity through magic and persistence. It's not a story of perfection, it's a story of maintenance. Everything must be continuously upheld, and humanity, in Egyptian belief, is part of this system too. People are not separate from cosmic order. They participate in it through action, through balance, through ritual, and through the simple act of trying, imperfectly, to align with Mat, which is, honestly, kind of exhausting when you think about it too long, because nothing in this universe is ever just done. It is always ongoing, always repeating, always being maintained. Even the gods are not above the system. They are inside it, performing their roles like eternal caretakers of a reality that refuses to become simple. And so Egyptian mythology never really ends. It cycles, like the sun, like the river, like judgment, like memory, and every time the sun rises over Egypt, it is not a conclusion, it is a reminder that everything is still working for now, and that somewhere in the dark beneath it all, the system continues its quiet, endless routine, waiting for nothing in particular, because it already has everything it needs to begin again. So, at this point, Egyptian mythology has basically stopped feeling like a story with a beginning and end, and started feeling like a very old machine that refuses to stop running, even when nobody fully remembers who built it. The sun still rises over Egypt. The Nile River still floods with that calm, seasonal confidence, like it has a schedule, more reliable than most modern alarms. And humanity continues doing its best to behave in ways that won't upset the invisible structure holding reality together. Which brings us to the final idea underneath everything we've talked about so far. Nothing in this system is accidental. Everything has a role, even the chaos, especially the chaos. We've already met Seth, who spends most of mythology being the uncomfortable presence in every divine meeting. But by this point, it should be clear. Seth is not an outsider. He is part of the design, because Egyptian mythology doesn't treat order and chaos as enemies in a one-must-win kind of way. It treats them as a permanent tension, a balance that only works because neither side fully disappears. Without Seth, order becomes stagnant. Without order, Seth becomes meaningless noise, so they remain locked together, like two forces that refuse to resolve because resolution would break the system. And speaking of systems that refuse to resolve, let's return to the afterlife one more time, because under the rule of Osiris, death is not an ending, it is a transition into structured evaluation. But even Osiris is not acting alone. The entire process depends on coordination, on balance, on memory, on truth being recorded correctly. That's where Thoth continues his eternal role, documenting every soul's journey with the calm precision of someone who has accepted that their job will never, ever end. And beside him, the principle of Maat continues to define what correct existence even means, not rulebook, but as a weight, a pressure, a standard. Everything is constantly measured against even gods, even kings, especially kings, which is why Egyptian pharaohs were not just rulers in a political sense. They were living participants in the cosmic structure. They were expected to reflect Maat in their governance, to act as earthly stabilizers of a much larger system. So when a pharaoh ruled well, it wasn't just good administration, it was cosmic alignment. And when things went wrong, it wasn't just politics, it was imbalance at the level of reality itself. No pressure, of course. Meanwhile, above all of this, Ra continues his endless cycle, day after day, night after night, traveling the sky, descending into the duat, facing chaos, returning again, not because he wants to, but because if he stops, everything stops, and so the universe becomes a kind of rhythm, a loop, pattern that sustains itself through repetition, rather than resolution. Even the gods are not finished beings, they are ongoing processes. Osiris is judgment, Horus is legitimacy, Set is disruption, Isis is continuity, Ra is recurrence, Thoth is record. At is balance, and humanity is participation. Not passive, not separate, but embedded inside the system, constantly contributing to its stability or instability through everyday life, which is maybe the quietest idea in the entire mythology, that existence is not something you escape or complete, it is something you maintain. And so the myths don't really end. Asterisk, they circle, they reflect each other, they repeat in different forms across time, across stories, across interpretations, like the sun returning, like the river returning, like order returning after chaos tries, once again, to interrupt it. And in that sense, Egyptian mythology is not really about gods sitting above the world. It is about a world that only exists because those forces continue to act within it forever, or at least until the story stops being told, which, for myths like this, it never really does. It just goes quiet for a while, waiting for the next sunrise over Egypt to remind us that everything is still going, still balancing, still repeating, still somehow fine, even when it isn't. And that's where we'll let it rest for tonight. So by now, Egyptian mythology has done what it always does when you think it might be wrapping up. It refuses, not loudly, not dramatically, just calmly continuing, like it never received the memo that stories are supposed to end neatly. The sun still rises over Egypt, like it's personally committed to routine. The Nile River keeps doing its ancient flood cycle, basically saying, I've been here longer than your calendar system. And reality itself keeps quietly obeying a set of rules that no one can fully step outside of. Because at this point, the entire mythological system is less a story and more a structure, and structures don't end. They just keep operating. Let's go back one more time to the idea that sits underneath everything we've talked about. Maat is not just goodness, it's not even morality in the modern sense. It is balance as a physical law of existence, like gravity, but for behavior, truth, and consequence. Everything in Egyptian mythology is either aligned with Matt or trying to return to it. He doesn't get erased or written out like a villain in a final chapter. He stays, because without him, there is no imbalance to correct. And without imbalance, there is no movement, no tension, no story at all. He is, in a very strange way, necessary. And that idea quietly changes everything. Because now nothing in the myth is purely good or bad. Everything is functional. Everything has a job, even suffering, even disorder, even lossal of it becomes part of a larger system that refuses to stop operating. Now let's drift back to the afterlife one more time, because it's too important to leave floating in the background. Under Osiris, death is not chaos. It is structured transition, a process, a kind of cosmic administration where the soul is evaluated not for belief, but for alignment with Matt, with balance, with truth as it is understood by the system, assisted by Anubis, who remains as calm and precise as ever, guiding each soul through the process like someone who has emotionally detached long ago for the sake of efficiency, and recorded by Thoth, because nothing in Egyptian mythology is ever truly unobserved. Everything is documented. Everything is remembered. Nothing fully disappears. Even existence itself is archived, which is honestly a bit intense when you think about it too long. Meanwhile, above all of this, Ra continues his daily and nightly cycle. Not because he is trapped in punishment, but because his movement is the system's stability. Every sunrise over Egypt is not just light. It is confirmation that chaos did not win. Overnight, that order returned again, and every sunset is not an ending. It is a descent into maintenance mode asterisk, where order is tested, repaired, reasserted, somehow still preserved, and humanity imperfectly exists inside all of this, not above it, not outside it, but woven into it, through ritual, through memory, through attempts to live in alignment with something larger than themselves, and that might be the most important idea buried in all these myths. No one is ever truly separate from the system. Not gods, not kings, not the dead. Everything is part of the same cycle. So when Horus represents kingship, it is not just political legitimacy, it is continuity. When Seth disrupts, it is not just violence, it is pressure that keeps structure from becoming stagnant. When Isis acts, it is not just emotion, it is persistence. When Osiris judges, it is not just authority, it is transformation. And when Ra rises again after the darkness of the Duat, it is not just astronomy, it is reassurance that the system still works. For now. And that is where Egyptian mythology always leaves you, not with an ending, but with repetition. World that does not conclude, only continues, quietly, predictably, endlessly. So tonight, as the sun rises and sets in its ancient rhythm over Egypt, the story does not close. It simply resets, waiting for the next cycle, the next telling, the next return. And maybe that's the most Egyptian thing of all. Nothing ever ends. So at this point, Egyptian mythology has stopped behaving like a story you finish and started behaving like a system you live inside. The sun still rises over Egypt. The Nile River keeps doing its ancient flood routine like it's been practicing the same schedule since time became a concept. And the world just continues, not because it's simple, but because it is carefully maintained. And that brings us to something we haven't really lingered on yet, humans. Because in all of this divine drama, Horus, Set, Isis, Osiris, Ra, Thoth, Mati, human beings are not just background decoration. They are participants, reluctant, confused, often tired participants, but still part of the system. In Egyptian belief, people exist inside the structure of Mat, not outside it. That means everyday life is not separate from cosmic order. It is part of it. Even small actions matter: speaking truthfully, keeping promises, performing rituals, maintaining balance in the smallest, most unglamorous ways imaginable. Because Mat is not only enforced by gods, it is sustained by behavior, which is honestly a lot of pressure for a civilization that also has to deal with floods, politics, family drama, and whatever Set is doing on a given Tuesday. Now, speaking of Set, he never really stops being relevant. He just becomes normalized. Set isn't removed or defeated in a final sense. Instead, he becomes part of the world's operating conditions. Storms, Set political instability, Set sudden disruptions in order. Also Set, but not as a simple villain, more like a necessary imbalance, a reminder that stability is not natural. It is maintained, and that is where Egyptian mythology becomes very different from a lot of later storytelling traditions. There is no final victory where everything becomes perfect forever. Instead, there is management. Now, let's return briefly to the divine administration team, because they are still very much working. Thoth continues recording everything, not selectively, not emotionally, just accurately. Every judgment, every outcome, every balance. Think of him as the universe's most patient archivist, writing down reality as it happens, so nothing can be argued out of existence later. Beside him, Anubis continues guiding souls through transition. No drama, no hesitation, just process after process after process, and above them all, Osiris presides over the afterlife not as a distant king, but as someone who has personally experienced loss, fragmentation, and reconstruction, which makes him unusually qualified because he understands that existence is not permanent form, it is transformation. Meanwhile, in the sky, Ra continues his endless cycle. Every day, rise, travel, descend, every night, enter the Duat, face chaos, continue anyway, every morning, return, and every sunrise over Egypt becomes a kind of silent announcement. The system is still functioning, not perfectly, not permanently guaranteed, but functioning, and humans, watching this cycle over generations, build their entire worldview around it. Life becomes a mirror of cosmic rhythm. Birth and death. Flood, disruption. Everything reflecting something larger than itself. Even kingship becomes part of this structure. Pharaohs are not just rulers. They are stabilizing figures within the system, representations of Horus in life, and associated with Osiris in death, which means leadership is not personal, it is symbolic, a role in the maintenance of Mat. And that's where the entire mythology quietly converges, because whether we are talking about gods, kings, or ordinary people, the pattern remains the same. Everything exists in relation to balance, and everything contributes to maintaining it. even when it fails, especially when it fails, because failure is also part of the system that gets corrected. So, Egyptian mythology doesn't really give us heroes in the modern sense. It gives us functions, roles in a cosmic structure that repeats itself endlessly without needing resolution. That might be why it feels so strange to modern storytelling. Because it refuses to end, it refuses to simplify, it refuses to pick a single winner. Instead, it offers something much quieter, a universe that continues because everything inside it keeps doing its part. So as night falls again over Egypt, Ra begins his descent once more. Set remains present in the structure of disruption. Thoth continues. Recording.ma at continues. Defining balance. Osiris continues. Judging.Anubis continues. Guiding Isis continues. Sustaining memory and continuity. Horus continues. Representing legitimacy and humanity continues living inside the pattern, not watching it, not outside it, but inside it. And the story doesn't end here. It never really does. It just keeps happening. Over and over again, like the river, like the sun. So at this point, Egyptian mythology has fully settled into its final form. Not a story, not a legend, but a cycle. Something that doesn't conclude because it was never designed to. The sun still rises over Egypt, like it's clocking in for another shift. It cannot quit. The Nile River keeps flooding and retreating like an ancient breathing pattern the world refuses to interrupt. And everything else just continues doing its job, because stopping is not part of the system. And that's really the core of it. Everything has a role, even the gods, even chaos, especially chaos. Let's go back one last time to the structure holding everything together. Matt is still the invisible framework behind everything we've talked about. Not a character you can remove, not a god you can defeat. More like the underlying correctness of reality itself. When things align with Matt, the world feels stable. When they don't, the system doesn't collapse, adjusts, because collapse is not part of the design. Correction is, and maintaining that correction requires constant participation. That's why even divine roles are never truly finished. Ra continues his eternal cycle. Every sunrise is not a new beginning. It's a continuation of the same process. Day, order visible, night, order tested, dawn, order restored, and every time the sun rises again over Egypt, it is essentially the universe saying, still working. Meanwhile, in the underworld, Osiris continues his role as judge of the dead, not in anger, not in reward, but in alignment. Each soul is evaluated not as good or bad in a modern sense, but as balanced or unbalanced against Maat, supported by Anubis, who continues guiding transitions with quiet precision, and recorded by who ensures that nothing is lost, forgotten, or rewritten incorrectly. Because in this system, memory is structure, and structure is stability. Above all of this, the tension between order and disruption remains permanently active. Horus represents legitimacy, continuity, and rightful structure. Set represents disruption, instability, and necessary imbalance, and neither one wins permanently, because winning would end the system. Asterisk, and the system cannot end It can only be maintained. Even human life reflects this. Daily rituals, social order, kingship, morality, all of it designed to mirror the larger cosmic pattern. Not because humans invented it, but because they are inside it, participants in a structure that existed before them and will continue after them. And that's the quietest, strangest part of Egyptian mythology. There is no outside, there is only participation. So the story doesn't resolve in the way modern narratives expect. No final victory, no final defeat, just equilibrium. A world held together by continuous correction, like a machine that only works because every part keeps moving. So, as we reach the end of this long, drifting journey through myth, we don't really get closure. We get continuation. The sun rises, the river flows, the gods perform their roles, and reality stays intact for one more cycle, asterisk, and then another dot, and another dot, because, in the end, Egyptian mythology was never asking how does it end. It was asking something much quieter. How does it keep going? And the answer is everything we just heard. So, for now, we let the world continue turning over Egypt. Not finished, not concluded, just ongoing, like it always has been, asterisk, and like it always will be. So we've reached the point where, normally, a story would start wrapping itself up, loose ends would get tied, music would swell, some kind of final lesson would appear like it had been waiting in the wings the whole time, asterisk. Egyptian mythology, of course, does none of that, because over and over again, it has been trying to tell us something very specific. There is no final state, asterisk, only ongoing balance. The sun still rises over Egypt. The Nile River still moves through its ancient cycle, like it has no interest in modern definitions of time. And the world just continues, not because it is perfect, but because it is maintained. And that idea, maintenance, is really the closest thing this mythology has to a conclusion.